3 days earlier, the small logistics software company I worked for had called our team into a meeting and told us we were being let go. We had lost a few major clients, expenses were getting cut, and junior people like me were easy decisions. I understood the math. I still hated being part of it. I had spent almost 2 years handling customer problems, updating shipping records, checking delivery issues, maintaining spreadsheets, and helping warehouse clients figure out why something had gone wrong. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like the start of something. Then suddenly it wasn't. My parents had recently moved into a smaller condo, so going back there wasn't really an option unless I wanted to sleep beside moving boxes in their dining room. Chris found out before I even finished packing. "You're staying here," he said. "I can get a motel for a few nights." "No. I have money." "You have limited money." "Thanks." "You're welcome." I told him 3 nights. Chris laughed. By the time I pulled into his driveway, I already knew neither of us believed that. I had been in that house hundreds of times growing up. Chris and I had known each other since elementary school. I had spent weekends there, watched football there, done homework at their kitchen table, and once helped Chris hide a broken basement window from his parents for almost 6 hours. But walking through the front door at 24 with no job felt completely different. Chris grabbed one of my boxes. "Guest room is exactly how you remember it. So, mostly storage?" "Storage with a bed. Luxury." I was carrying my second box upstairs when I heard the garage door open. A minute later, Laura came inside. I had known Chris's mom for most of my life, obviously. In my head, she had always existed in the same category as teachers, neighbors, and other parents. Adults who were around while Chris and I were busy being kids. But I wasn't a kid anymore. And apparently I had never really looked at her before. She wore dark jeans, ankle boots, and a fitted blue sweater under a light jacket. Her chestnut-colored hair rested around her shoulders, and she looked tired from work without looking worn down. She saw me near the stairs and stopped. "Oh, Nate." Then she came over and hugged me. "I wish you were visiting for a better reason." That was it. No sad expression. No speech about how everything happened for a reason. No questions about whether I had saved enough money. Just that. "I do too," I said. She stepped back. "Chris showed you the guest room?" "He described it as luxury." Laura looked toward the stairs. "He lies when he's nervous. I lie when I'm optimistic." Chris called from upstairs. Dinner that night was strangely normal. Laura made chicken, rice, and roasted vegetables. Chris spent 10 minutes reminding us about a basketball game where I missed 2 free throws in 8th grade. I reminded him that his team still won because I had scored 16 points before that. "You remember the exact number?" Laura asked. "Some wounds stay fresh." She smiled. Chris talked about the fitness center where he worked and complained about a member who kept moving equipment into the wrong section. Laura told him that maybe being an assistant manager meant occasionally managing things. Then she asked me about Cincinnati. I explained what I had done at the company and how quickly the layoffs happened. She listened without interrupting. Finally, she asked, "What do you actually want to do next?" I looked down at my plate. I'd settle for somebody answering an application. Chris gave me a sympathetic look. Laura didn't. She just nodded. "Then tomorrow you send another one." Something about that helped more than reassurance would have. The next morning, I started applying. Then I kept applying. Customer operations, distribution support, account coordination, warehouse services, anything that sounded close enough to what I already knew. Chris worked weird shifts, sometimes leaving before 7 and sometimes not going in until noon. Laura worked from home several days a week, usually from a small office near the kitchen. That meant we kept ending up around the coffee maker at the same time. At first, our conversations lasted 30 seconds. "Any interviews?" "One phone screen." "Good." Could also be terrible. That's the spirit. A few days later, I got a rejection email before I had even finished breakfast. Laura came into the kitchen while I was staring at my laptop. "That face looks promising." They went with another candidate. She poured coffee. "Sorry, I should have seen the layoff coming." She looked at me over the mug. "Seeing a door close doesn't mean you know where the next one is." I gave her a look. "That sounds suspiciously motivational." "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation." Living there made me desperate to be useful. I cleaned up after myself, took out trash without being asked, helped Chris move some boxes in the basement. Then one afternoon, Laura mentioned that the garage light had been flickering for weeks. "I can look at it," I said. "You don't have to." "I know. That was exactly why I wanted to." The fixture turned out to be simple. I shut everything off, checked it, replaced the bad part, and tested it. Laura stood beside me holding the small box of replacement pieces. When I reached for one, our arms brushed. It was nothing, except neither of us moved immediately. I looked at her. She looked back. Then she handed me the piece. Here. Thanks. I finished the job and switched the light on. Laura looked up. You're useful around here. That's currently my whole resume. She turned toward me. No, it isn't. She said it casually, but it hit me harder than it should have. After that, I started noticing things. How calm she sounded on work calls even when contractors were making excuses. How she remembered the schedule of my interviews. How she asked Chris questions and actually expected answers. Mostly, I noticed that I liked talking to her. A week later, I had a bad interview. Not terrible enough to be funny. Just bad enough that I knew I wouldn't get the job. I sat at the kitchen table afterward pretending to read emails. Laura came in and took one look at me. I feel like I'm 24 and already moving backward. She pulled out the chair across from me. You lost a job. You didn't lose your adulthood. I laughed once. Feels pretty similar from this side. It isn't. I looked at her. Did you ever feel like you had to restart? That was the first time she told me much about the divorce. She didn't make Chris's dad sound terrible. She said they had slowly become two people sharing responsibilities instead of a life. Then she said something I kept thinking about afterward. I didn't lose everything. That almost would have been easier. I just woke up one day and realized I had become useful to everyone and interesting to nobody. I frowned. That's not how I see you. Laura went quiet. The way she looked at me changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The next few days felt different after that. Longer eye contact. Small pauses. Conversations that kept going after they had a natural place to stop. One morning, I brought Laura coffee while she was stuck on a work call. Chris saw me set it beside her laptop. My mom likes you better than me. Without looking away from her screen, Laura said, he listens. Chris laughed and walked off. I didn't. That Friday, Chris went to a coworker's birthday dinner. I stayed home because I had an early interview the next morning. Laura finished some work, made tea, and sat in the living room. I had coffee, even though it was probably too late for coffee. We talked for almost an hour. Nothing dramatic. Work. Chris. The neighborhood. Cincinnati. Then Laura got quieter. Can I tell you something embarrassing? Sure. She stared into her cup. Sometimes I think my most interesting years are behind me. I didn't answer immediately. She gave a small smile. I spent so long being needed that I forgot what being wanted felt like. I looked at her. I notice you. Her eyes lifted to mine. As Chris's mother? I should have said yes. I knew that. Instead, I said no. The room went very still. Laura set her cup down. This is a terrible idea. Probably. Then why aren't you moving? I looked at her. You aren't either. For a second, neither of us did anything. Then Laura reached across the space between us and took my hand. That surprised me more than anything else. She looked nervous for the first time since I had come back to Columbus. I leaned closer slowly enough that she could stop me. She didn't. We kissed once. Careful. Brief. When we pulled apart, Laura stayed close for half a second before sitting back. Her hand slipped from mine. Neither of us spoke. I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen and a car passing outside. Laura looked at me, then toward the hallway. We cannot do anything else tonight. Okay. I said it immediately. She nodded. Okay. I stood up, picked up my coffee, and headed toward the guest room. At the doorway, I looked back. Laura was still sitting on the couch, staring at the cup in front of her. That was when it really hit me. I had come to that house because I had nowhere else to go, and I had just kissed my best friend's mother. I barely slept. Not because I regretted it. That would have been simpler. I kept replaying the moment Laura reached for my hand. Then the second after we pulled apart, when both of us understood exactly how complicated we had just made the house. By 7 the next morning, I was already in the kitchen pretending to care about an application I had opened 20 minutes earlier. Chris came downstairs first. He grabbed cereal, complained about having an opening shift, and spent 5 minutes telling me about a guy at the gym who apparently believed wiping down equipment was a personal attack on his freedom. I nodded in the right places. Laura walked in while he was still talking. Our eyes met. Maybe 1 second. Maybe less. It still felt like Chris should have noticed a flashing sign above both our heads. He didn't. Morning, Laura said. Morning. Chris looked between us only because he wanted the coffee pot. You two look exhausted. Thanks, I said. You especially. Better. Laura hid a smile by opening a cabinet. Chris left 20 minutes later. The front door closed. Silence. Laura stood at the kitchen counter with both hands around her coffee mug. We should talk. Yeah. She sat across from me at the table. For a few seconds, neither of us seemed interested in being first. Then she said, "Last night can't become a pattern." I nodded. "You're living here," she continued. "You lost your job. Chris is your best friend. I'm older than you. There are about 12 different ways this could become unfair before we even figure out what this is. I know. And I don't want you wondering 6 months from now whether you actually wanted this or whether you were just having a terrible month and I happened to be nice to you." That bothered me. Not because she was completely wrong. Because part of me understood why she had to ask. I don't think that's what happened. I don't either. That surprised me. Laura looked down at the table. That's part of the problem. I sat back. Then the answer became obvious. Then nothing happens while I'm dependent on you. She looked up. I continued before I could make it more complicated. No more of last night. Not while I'm staying here. Not while I'm unemployed. I get back on my feet, get my own place. And then if we still feel the same, we talk. Right? Laura studied me for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay. It wasn't romantic. That was probably why I trusted it. Write in the comments, what would bother you most? The age difference, dating your best friend's mom, living under the same roof, or keeping the attraction secret. The next few weeks were harder than I expected. Laura and I didn't suddenly become cold. That would have been obvious. We still drank coffee in the same kitchen. We still talked about interviews. I still helped carry groceries when she came home with too many bags. We just stopped giving ourselves opportunities to forget the agreement. No long conversations after Chris went out. No sitting too close in the living room. No private messages that had nothing to do with schedules or groceries. It should have made everything easier. Instead, I became much more aware of her. One morning she walked past the table while I was filling out an application, touched the back of an empty chair instead of stopping, and said, "Good luck today." That was all. I thought about it through half the interview. My job search slowly got more serious. I stopped applying to anything with the word operations in the title and actually started looking at what the companies did. A regional distribution company on the west side had an opening for an operations coordinator. The work sounded familiar without being exactly the same as Cincinnati. Shipping records, client issues, warehouse coordination, delivery problems, reporting, things I could actually explain without pretending I knew more than I did. I got a phone interview, then an in-person one. The night before, I asked Laura if she would look at my resume. She read it at the kitchen table. "You undersell yourself. I prefer realistic expectations." You wrote, "Assisted with customer issues." What does that mean? I handled customer issues. Then write that. That sounds aggressive. It sounds employed. She helped me clean up 2 lines, then asked me one practice question. What did you learn from your last position? I gave her some polished answer about communication and managing priorities. Laura stared at me. What? You don't believe that answer? Interviewers might. Try again. So I did. I learned I'm better when there's an actual problem to solve. If somebody gives me a vague project and says make it innovative, I'm not your guy. If a warehouse has the wrong shipping record and a client needs an answer in 30 minutes, I'm useful. Laura smiled. That one. The interview went well. Not perfect. But when I walked out, I didn't immediately think of everything I had said wrong. 2 days later they called. I got the job. I was sitting in my car outside a grocery store when the offer came through. My first call was to my parents. My second was Chris. Then I stared at Laura's name for a few seconds before calling her. She answered from work. Well, I start Monday. There was a pause. Then I heard the smile in her voice. I knew you could do it. No, you didn't. No, but I thought you could. That was better. The job gave me structure again almost immediately. I got up early, put on actual work clothes, drove across Columbus with everyone else. I came home tired for reasons that didn't involve refreshing job boards. The first paycheck felt strangely important. The second one felt even better. After the third, I started looking at apartments. Chris acted personally offended. You realize nobody is asking you to leave. I've been here over a month. So I said 3 nights. That was obviously fiction. I found a small 1-bedroom about 15 minutes away. Nothing impressive. White walls. Basic kitchen. Small living room. Parking lot view. I loved it immediately. It was mine. Chris helped me move on a Saturday. Laura came over later with a lamp, a set of kitchen towels, a saucepan, and a small box of basic supplies. You think I can't survive without supervision? I've seen your old apartment. Fair. Chris went downstairs to grab another box from my car. For the first time all day, Laura and I were alone. I stood near the doorway holding my new apartment key. She looked around. You did good. I looked at her. I'm not your guest anymore. Her expression changed just slightly. I noticed. Chris came back before either of us said anything else. I waited 4 days. Then I called her. Not late at night. Not from the guest room. From my own apartment. Are you free Friday? There was a short pause. For what? Dinner. Nate. A real dinner. In public. Another pause. If we're going to make another mistake, I'd rather do it with reservations. She laughed. That decided it. Friday night, we met at a neighborhood restaurant instead of driving together. Laura wore dark jeans, a soft green blouse, and a jacket. I had changed shirts 3 times, which I planned to deny forever. For the first 10 minutes, we talked like two people who had never held hands. Then Laura finally said, "This is strange." Very. You're enjoying that. A little. Her smile disappeared after a moment. What happens when your life gets bigger again? I knew what she meant. New job. New people. More money eventually. Maybe a better apartment. A life that didn't look like the one I had when I showed up at her house. You think I'm going to wake up and decide this was part of being unemployed? I think it's possible. And I think you might decide you only liked me because I noticed you. Laura looked at me. That's possible too. Okay. We can't prove anything tonight. She leaned back. I continued. You asked what happens when my life gets bigger again. Then you get to decide whether you still want to be in it. You don't get to decide for me now. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she nodded. That was annoyingly reasonable. I've had a strong month. We talked for almost 2 hours. About Chris. About the age difference. About her divorce. About my job. About what people would probably think. Nothing disappeared because we discussed it. But it stopped feeling like something happening to us. It became a choice. Outside the restaurant, we stood beside her car. Laura looked at me. So what now? I ask if I can see you again. You can. And then? She stepped closer. Then maybe we find out whether moving out actually made you less complicated. It did not. I noticed. This time when we kissed, neither of us had to listen for Chris coming through the front door. There was no guest room waiting for me. No application open on my laptop. No reason either of us had to stay in the same place. And somehow that made the kiss matter more. Because this time, Laura wasn't the woman whose house I needed. She was simply the woman I had come to see. For the first few weeks, dating Laura felt surprisingly normal. That was probably the strangest part. I had expected every conversation to feel loaded because of Chris. I thought every dinner would come with some reminder that I was dating the mother of the guy who had known me since I was 8. Instead, most of it was ordinary. We got coffee before work. She came over to my apartment and criticized the fact that I owned 4 forks, but somehow 6 coffee mugs. I met her after work near downtown once, and we walked for almost an hour while she complained about a contractor who had changed a renovation schedule 3 times without telling anyone. Another night, we went grocery shopping because I needed food and she needed detergent. That became a date somehow. You buy like a college student, she said, looking into my cart. I buy efficiently. You have frozen pizza, cereal, eggs, and salsa. 4 food groups. Those aren't food groups. They are in this apartment. She laughed and added vegetables to my cart. I took them out. She put them back. That was what being with her became. Not some constant dramatic thing. Just 2 people finding reasons to keep seeing each other. After several dates, we finally had the conversation neither of us wanted to make too formal. We were sitting on my couch after dinner. Laura looked at me and said, "We're actually dating, right?" I smiled. I was hoping so. I mean it. I know. I don't want this to be something we're doing because it feels unusual. I put my drink on the table. Then let's call it what it is. She watched me. A relationship? Yeah. She looked relieved and worried at the same time. That night, before things went any further, she asked me one more question. Are you sure this isn't still exciting because it used to be forbidden? I thought about it. It was more exciting when I had to walk past Chris to get coffee. Laura covered her face for a second. Please never say that again. This feels better. She looked back at me. Why? Because I can leave whenever I want. Her expression shifted. And you're staying? Yeah. She leaned over and kissed me. The rest of the evening stayed private between us. After that, The only real problem was Chris. At first, we had both been able to avoid saying it. Then I couldn't anymore. One Sunday morning, Laura and I were sitting at a coffee shop a few neighborhoods from her house. I said, "We need to tell him." Laura looked at her cup. "I know. You've said that twice." "I still know." "When?" She looked at me. "I don't know." I leaned back. That was the first time we had any real tension between us. Not a fight. Just something neither of us could joke around. "He's my best friend," I said. "He's my son." "I know." "Then you know why I'm not excited about sitting him down and changing the way he sees both of us." I understood that. I just hated hiding. Every time Chris sent me a message asking if I wanted to grab food or watch a game, I felt like I was lying even when the conversation had nothing to do with Laura. A few days later, the decision got made for us. Laura and I stopped at another coffee shop after work. We weren't doing anything obvious. We were sitting across from each other talking about weekend plans. One of Chris's co-workers from the fitness center walked in. I recognized him. He recognized me. Then he recognized Laura. He came over, said hello, talked for maybe 30 seconds, and left. The entire conversation was completely normal. Laura waited until he was outside. That wasn't good. "No. You think he'll say something?" "Yes." She looked at me. "You answered very quickly." "Because he definitely will." I was right. Chris called me the next afternoon. "Where are you?" "At work." "Can you come by after?" His voice sounded different. Not angry yet. Just flat. "Yeah." When I pulled into the driveway that evening, he was standing near the garage. I got out of my car. Chris didn't even say hello. "Are you dating my mom?" There was no good version of the next 5 seconds. I could lie and make everything worse. Or I could tell him the truth and watch his face change. "Yes." He stared at me. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny. "You're serious?" "Yes." Chris stepped back. "Since when?" "Not while I was living here." His face tightened immediately. "What does that mean?" I knew I had already made it worse. "We kissed once while I was staying here." Chris looked at me like he wasn't sure he had heard correctly. "You lived in this house." "I know. My mom was helping you." "I know. You were sleeping 10 feet from my room." "Chris." "No. Don't say my name like I'm being unreasonable." I wasn't going to. He started walking toward the driveway, then turned around. "You were my best friend. You could have told me." "That part is true. That part. We should have told you earlier." "So there are parts where I'm wrong?" I shook my head. "No." Chris looked genuinely hurt now, which was worse than the anger. "I feel like an idiot." "You aren't. I've been talking to both of you for weeks like everything was normal." I didn't have an answer for that. Then the garage door opened behind us. Laura came outside. She looked at Chris, then at me. "You told him?" he asked. Chris turned toward her. "How long?" Laura stayed calm. "We started dating after Nate moved out. And before that." She hesitated. Chris laughed again. "Great." Laura stepped closer. There was one kiss. Chris looked between us. "In my house?" "Yes." While he was staying here because he had nowhere else to go. Laura's expression sharpened. I reached for him first. Chris went quiet. She continued. "He did not take advantage of me." I didn't say he did. "You were about to make this only about what Nate did." Chris shook his head. "That isn't the only thing I'm angry about." Laura stopped. Chris looked at both of us. "If you two break up, what am I supposed to do?" Neither of us answered immediately. He pointed at me. "You're my best friend." Then at Laura. "And you're my mom." His voice dropped. "If this falls apart, am I supposed to pick one of you?" That was the first thing he said that cut through every defense I had prepared. Because he was right. Not about everything, but about that. I looked at him. "You shouldn't have to pick either one. You can't promise that." I wanted to. I couldn't. "No." Chris looked away. I continued. "I can promise I understand why you're angry." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he looked back at me. "I don't want to talk to you right now." I nodded. "Okay. I mean for a while." That hurt more than I expected. But I nodded again. "Okay." I left. Laura called later that night. Her voice sounded tired. "I think we should stop." I stood in the middle of my apartment holding the phone. "Because you don't want this?" She didn't answer. "Laura, Chris is upset." "I know. He's my son." "I know that too." I spent years trying to keep everything stable for him. Something about the way she said it made me sit down. "And now you're going to do it again?" "Do what?" "Disappear." She went quiet. I hated how harsh the word sounded. But I meant it. "You told me you spent years being useful to everybody and forgot what you wanted. Now Chris is upset. and your first answer is that maybe you shouldn't get to want anything. That isn't fair. Maybe not. I lowered my voice. If you want to end this because you don't want me, I'll accept it. Laura didn't speak. But if you end it because you think you're only allowed to be Chris's mother, I won't pretend that's the same thing. There was a long silence. Then she said, "You make everything sound simpler than it is." "No, this is not simple at all." That almost made her laugh. Almost. I continued. "I don't want you choosing me because you're trying to prove something either. I know. And I'm not asking you to fight with Chris for me. I know that too. Then decide what you actually want." She was quiet so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, she said, "I want you." I closed my eyes. "Okay. But I hate that he feels betrayed. So do I. And we're going to have to deal with that." "I know." Another pause. Then Laura said, "I'm not ending it." There was no big romantic speech after that. No victory. Chris was still angry. I had still damaged a friendship that mattered to me. Laura still had to face her son, knowing part of his complaint was completely fair. But for the first time since he found out, it felt like we had stopped reacting. Laura wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to chase Chris around demanding forgiveness. And neither of us was going to pretend hiding the relationship had been harmless. We had chosen each other. Now we had to live with what that choice changed. Laura talked to Chris without me. That was her decision, and I agreed with it. As much as I wanted to fix things with him, that conversation wasn't mine to manage. She called me afterward. "He's still angry." I figured. But he listened. That was something. Laura told him she was sorry we had hidden the relationship. She didn't make excuses for that part. She also told him she wasn't sorry for having a relationship. Apparently, Chris had stared at her for a long time after she said that. Then he asked, "So this is serious?" Laura answered yes. I wasn't there, but hearing that still hit me. She also told him something I probably couldn't have said without making everything worse. "Nate isn't replacing your dad. And being your mother doesn't mean the rest of my life stopped belonging to me." Chris didn't answer much after that. He left to meet some friends. For the next few weeks, I stayed away. Not from Laura. From Chris. That distinction mattered. I didn't send him long messages. I didn't show up at the gym. I didn't ask mutual friends whether he was still mad. I went to work. I saw Laura. And I gave him the space he asked for. Work helped. The distribution company was busier than my old job, but in a way I liked. There were actual problems every day. A delayed shipment. A warehouse count that didn't match the system. A customer who needed an answer before noon. I understood that kind of pressure. About 2 months in, my manager started giving me more accounts to handle. Then I got trained on some scheduling work that had previously gone to people above me. One afternoon, he stopped at my desk. "You're good at keeping things moving." I almost laughed. That was basically the first compliment anyone had given me professionally since Cincinnati. "Thanks." When I told Laura later, she smiled. "See? Don't." "What?" "You're about to say the layoff was secretly good for me." I would never say something that annoying. "Good." I was thinking it loudly. I pointed at her. "That's worse." She laughed. Laura was changing too. Not because of me. That was important. One Saturday, she told me she had signed up for a weekend photography class. "You take pictures with your phone every day." "That's not the same." "Are you sure?" "No." She went anyway. Then she started taking walks around different parts of Columbus with an actual camera she borrowed from a friend. She also rearranged her home office and started going out more with 2 women from work. It was like she had remembered she was allowed to make plans that weren't about solving someone else's problem. About 3 weeks after Chris asked me for space, I got a message. "Diner tomorrow? 6. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. I stared at it for a while before answering. "Yeah." The next night, Chris was already sitting in a booth when I got there. I slid in across from him. He looked at me. "This is still weird." I'd worry if it stopped being weird in 3 weeks. His mouth moved like he was trying not to smile. That helped. We ordered burgers. For the first 5 minutes, we talked about nothing important. Work. The gym. A guy we both knew from high school who had apparently bought a motorcycle despite barely knowing how to ride a bicycle. Then Chris put his drink down. "Are you serious about her?" "Yes." He watched me carefully. "How serious?" "I don't know how to measure that." "Try." I thought about it. Then I told him the truth. I liked her when I was living in that house. I knew I loved being with her after I moved out, and nothing was forcing us into the same room anymore. Chris looked down at the table. That was the first time I had said the word loved out loud. I noticed. I'm pretty sure he did too. He rubbed a hand over his face. Man. Yeah. This is terrible. Also, yeah. He looked at me again. I still hate that you didn't tell me. You should. And if this goes badly, I'm going to be furious. Fair. You're agreeing too much. I tried arguing. Didn't go great. That finally got a laugh out of him. Small, but real. Then his expression turned serious again. I never want details. I nodded immediately. I was already planning to keep every detail until death. Good. Possibly longer. Stop. That dinner didn't fix everything. But we talked again the next week. Then we watched a game. Then one Saturday Chris called because his car wouldn't start, and apparently I was still the person he wanted to complain to while waiting for roadside help. That was how our friendship came back. Not through one big apology. Just ordinary things. Laura and I stopped hiding too. We weren't dramatic about it. We just became public. Coffee shops. Dinner. Walks along the river. She came to my apartment whenever she wanted. I went to her house, without feeling like I had to check whether Chris was there first. The first dinner with all three of us was uncomfortable. Chris sat across from us and looked deeply suspicious when Laura asked if I wanted more potatoes. You always give him more food. Laura stared at him. You are 25. That's not a denial. I looked at Chris. I can give them back. Don't make it worse. Laura laughed. Eventually, that kind of awkwardness became normal. Not gone. Normal. Over the next year, my job kept getting better. I got more responsibility, a small raise, and training that put me on track for a senior coordinator role. For most of that year, I kept my apartment. Laura kept the house. We didn't rush anything just because the hardest part was behind us. Then Chris finally moved into his own place with a coworker from the gym. A couple months later, Laura started talking about the house. It's too big. It has always been this size. You know what I mean. I did. The place had been built around a version of her life that didn't exist anymore. Chris had moved out. She didn't need 3 bedrooms and a basement full of things nobody used. So she asked me a question. What would you think about finding something together? I stared at her. A place. No, Nate. A boat. I smiled. Just checking. We talked about it for weeks. Money. Commutes. Neighborhoods. Space. The fact that I refused to move back into the house where our whole situation had started. Laura agreed immediately. That would feel strange. Extremely. Eventually, she decided to sell the house. We found a smaller townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, with a bright kitchen, a little patio, and enough room for both of us without feeling oversized. Signing those papers felt different from getting my apartment key. That first apartment had proved I could stand on my own again. This place wasn't rescue. It wasn't temporary. We chose it together. Moving day was chaotic. Chris came over to help, complained constantly, and somehow carried fewer boxes than everyone else. Late in the afternoon, I walked through the garage and noticed the light flickering. I looked up. Laura saw me. Don't. What? You are not turning our relationship into another repair project. I pointed at the ceiling. It's literally a bad bulb. Chris started laughing from behind a stack of boxes. I actually remember the first one. Laura looked at him. Please don't. He grinned. For once, he looked completely comfortable. A few weeks later, Chris came over for dinner. The three of us sat around the table talking about work, apartment problems, Laura's photography class, and whether Chris was ever going to learn how to cook something besides pasta. After he left, Laura and I cleaned the kitchen. She handed me a plate. Do you ever think about that first night? The kiss. The part where I said it was wrong. I looked at her. You were right about one thing. What? It was complicated. She smiled. And the other part? I reached for her hand. You reached for me anyway. Her fingers closed around mine. You did, I said. When I first came back to Columbus, I thought I needed a job, an apartment, and some proof that my life had not gone backward. I got all 3. What I didn't expect was Laura. She once told me reaching for me was wrong. Maybe under that roof, with everything unspoken, it was. But a year later there were no guest rooms, no hiding, and no one making the choice for us. She still reached for my hand. This time, neither of us let go.